to all these Iraqi families locked up over there. And he started waving at them, and they started waving at him. And the Iraqi guards down in this compound who had been torturing that guy tied up to the post, it looked like the Keystone Cops. They all jumped up and took off and ran inside the building. And I said, Larry, they're coming for you, buddy. And they went in his cell door. I started praying for him. They were just beating him unmercilessly for such a long time. I really thought they were going to kill him on that point right there. But they finally stopped. And then we were we were taken to another prison after that, and another old French-looking fort from way back, and it was just crumbling apart. And this one actually had the concrete walls between us, and you could look at it and see little blocks of concrete stuck in the wall. You could pull them out and look through the next cell over there. And as luck would have it, Colonel Arcee was thrown in the cell next to me. And that evening, they put another prisoner in with each of us, so we were not in solitary for that one night. And I had one of the Italian pilots in with me, and Colonel Arcee had with him the A4 driver, Colonel Mohammed, and just deathly quiet in there. And the food, they give us a couple of pieces of bread a day here, better bread, and a little cup of tea. The tea tasted really delicious. I've always liked that tea. And the bread was chewy and good, what they gave it to us, And they started giving us extra, so I just stack it on the floor next to me. Let it sit there and save it up for later on. But we stayed there for a while. And then one day they came in and said, we're going to another prison. And they loaded us up again and took us out to another prison and put us in a cell. And we stayed there 2 or 3 days. And one day, no bad treatment here. The bad treatment was over since Colonel B's forces blew them to hell and gone. And we stayed there for a while, and the guy opened the door one day in a shabby civilian clothing, much like mine, and he said, I can tell you this, you're going home to your country today. And that was encouraging news. And so they marshaled a bunch of us out into the inner courtyard there and started calling out the names and pointing them over towards where a bus was parked nearby. And they got to my name, and he said, who are you? And I said, Hunter. And he said, psst. And they put me back into prison, in the cell again, which I thought, all right, what's going on here? But I knew if they were going, we would be a day or two behind them. And surely enough, when next day arose and they took us down to the end of the hallway and put some big pot of water and let us wash a little bit, gave us a new orange POW uniform to put on, which wasn't torn and shredded and dirty as hell, and gave me a pair of tennis shoes to put on for the first time, and because I was barefooted, gave me some socks. And then they rolled us out into the hallway and would put blindfolds on us, took us down the end of the hallway, out the door, and started loading us on a bus. And we got on a bus and we started traveling, and the Iraqi guards started coming by and taking off our blindfolds. And I was looking at the gent next to me. We started talking, and I had known him for some time, ran across him before, seen him earlier in the POW episode. And I finally said, what's your name? And he says, I'm Colonel Everly. Don't you remember me? I said, God, Colonel, you look like shit. And he was on his last legs, I swear. If he hadn't gotten at it soon, he probably would have died. He was a thin guy to start with, for you that know him. And he was just wasting away. And they took us, as we got on the bus, they sprayed us with this perfume stuff. It was funny. And they took us downtown, turned us over to the International Red Cross at some hotel there. And of course the power was out for the most of the city, but they had generators, so they could have some power there ever so often in the hotel. And there was no food. The Red Cross fed us chocolates. It was Swiss International Red Cross, and I guess they're crazy about chocolate, so they kept feeding us chocolate. They gave us some little tiny bars of soap, and once the generator had been on for 2 or 3 hours, they said the water's warm enough, you can go take a shower. And so we did that, and Acre would come out of the shower and say, "How do I look?" And I'd make him bend over and look at his scalp. I said, "Back in the shower, buddy. You're filthy yet." And just grime ground into his skin, his scalp. And they gave us some toothbrushes too, but not enough, so we just shared toothbrushes there to get our teeth clean for the first time. I didn't care. And at nighttime, it got cold, of course. This is in Baghdad in February, in March now, and they'd turn off the generators after a while, and there'd be no heat. So we all got gathered in separate rooms, a bunch of us, and at night, we still had all we had was our POW uniforms, and after a while, we'd all climb in, a bunch of us in the same bed, and pile all these things over us, the quilts and blankets we could round up from the other rooms to stay warm, and we all get in the bed, and everybody's going to sleep, and I told Colonel Acre, I said, once before we were in this situation in that third prison where we were all in the same room together. We were in the same room together, this time in a bed together. The next time there better be a woman in here somewhere. So we had a good chuckle about that. Let me back up with another piece of humor here. On the last day of February, the bombing had been steady all night. Some of the bombs were getting a little too close for my comfort. And then the sun came up, and one of the Iraqi guards had come over and was talking to Colonel Mohammed in the cell with Colonel Acre. And he was chattering away, and after he left, it got all quiet again. So I went over and did the old shaving and haircut thing on the wall, and I reached over and pulled my chunk of concrete out so I could look through and see Acre there. And he'd been over, and because he'd been talking to the guards, and I said, "Well, what's going on?" And remember, today's the last day of the month. So he said, "Well, first of all, today's payday." So that was good, And so he said the Iraqi guard told him that fighting has stopped. And it looks like we're going to be getting out of here maybe pretty soon. So back to when we got out. We were in the last prison, and he took us to the hotel. And the next day, they loaded us up and took us to the airport. And on the way out, you could see the bombing effects of the city, some good accurate bombing. There'd be one place really destroyed, next to it hardly any damage at all. So good accurate bombing. So we got to the airport, and a couple of C9s from Swiss were landed there, Switzerland, International Red Cross. And some Iraqi POWs were getting off that we had captured. And I got to tell you, the viewpoints for the two groups were entirely opposite. They looked like they were scared to death to come back to their country. They were scared of what was going to happen to them, I think. And we were happy as hell, of course. And we got on the plane, and the Red Cross guys were telling us, "Don't look at the Revolutionary Guards here. Don't give them the finger. Don't do anything to them." So as soon as we took off and got up above the clouds, some Air Force planes, F-16s if I remember right, parked themselves on either side. And they gave us a good escort all the way back. We went to Riyadh, got off one plane, shook a few hands, walked down and got on another plane, went to Bahrain. Then we got off that plane, and they got on a bus, and they took us to the hospital ship out there. And we stayed on there a few days and got some ice cream, and had a good time eating and everything. Got my hair cut. And a few days, and they said, "All right, we're heading to the States." So we got on a bus again, went to the airport there at Bahrain, and got on another jetliner and took off and refueling in Ireland, and then went straight into Andrews Air Force Base, all of us together, and landed there, and had a great welcome there. Everybody was there, the Colin Powell and all the big shots were there. Marine Commandant General Gray was there, and good to talk to all those folks. And I had been running into General Gray over and over throughout the years since he was a full colonel, and for some strange reason he took a liking to me. So every time he'd see me, he would talk to me for a while, you know, and see what was going on. And we got there and he said, "Guy, anything I can do for you?" And I said, "Well, I hope you keep the OV-10s. They do a good job for you, you know." And he said, "What else?" And I said, "Well, I'm due to retire here pretty soon, my 30-year mark, you know." And he said, I'd like to stay in a little bit longer if you don't mind, because I really enjoyed being in the Marine Corps. And he says, "Well, I can do both things for you." He says, "As long as I'm commandant, we're going to have OV-10s." He was right, but as soon as he got through being commandant, the OV-10s were gone. They disestablished the squadrons, and I helped fly a bunch of them out to the boneyard at Tucson, you know, and then I was in charge of disbanding, decommissioning our squadron, and flew out to the West Coast to observe the decommissioning of the other OV-10 squadron out there. It was a shame that plane went away. It was such a good workhorse plane. And we got through at Andrews Air Force Base and stayed about a week there, I guess, overall. And then they put us on some more planes and flew us back to Camp Pendleton. Oh, all the wives and relatives were there to meet us at Andrews when we got off too. My wife was there and everybody. It was a great feeling to get home. We went back to Pendleton, and I had a month's leave, you know, because the squadron was still hadn't even started coming back yet from Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia. And so I started trying to get back in shape by jogging. I used to be a marathon runner in my younger and trimmer days, and started trying to run again. Could run about 100 yards and couldn't make it any further. Couldn't do a single pull-up, you know, at that time I was so weak. But I was gradually getting back into shape, and then the squadron showed back up, and I had to go get another flight physical up chit from the flight surgeon, you know, to start back. So I started flying again. And the next thing you know, they say the more things change, the more they stay the same. You know, our big thing, like is for us, is like red flag. Ours is the CACs, as we call them, combined arms exercises at 29 Palms, California, the big desert. That's what we did. In my career, I counted them up one time. I went to 32 of those things out there. They're all 3 weeks to 6 weeks, you know. So I had a good time. So I'm back at the CACs again. You know, 2 months later, in July, hot as hell in the desert again. And things are the same, it looks like. But there's a couple of funny things this time, though. I was out at the CACs, and we sent an OV-10 over to Camp Pendleton every day to pick up our mail. You know, it was very, very close for us for an airplane flight. And he came back one day with a bunch of mail, and I was sitting there with my feet up on the old field desk outside in one of our hooches, and talking to the dead OIC, a Major Guy Close, and I was reading a letter, and I said, "Holy cow!" And he said, "What is it?" I said, "It's a letter from the Defense Finance Agency." And he said, "Really? And what does it say?" I said, it says that if you're a POW, for every single day you're a POW, you're drawing worldwide rate per diem." He goes, "Really?" He said, "Is there a check in there?" I said, "Yeah, there's a check in here." And he said, "What does it say?" I said, "It says big screen TV." So it was funny to beat the band. But I got back, finally after the exercise was over, got back to Camp Pendleton where we were living on base, and said, "Mary, get dressed. We're going to Sears. I know where a big screen TV is." She said, "How are you going to pay for that?" And I said, "Look at this, look at this." So we went out and got that, and went on about our business, started training, and then this was in '91 still, you understand. And so I was due to retire. This is '92 now. And that's '92 is we all deployed early up to Nellis Air Force Base that year with our entire squadron. And that's when I contacted the F-117s up there, and I said, "I think you're the guys that bombed our prison on this particular night." And they had some guy get on the phone with me, and he looked it up and he said, "Yeah, that was us." And I said, "If you don't mind, look through the FLIR video. I'd like to have that, if you don't mind, for a souvenir." So he sent me the FLIR video and a little letter with it and said, "Here it is." He sent me the whole VHS tape, and he said, "It's right here at the 5-minute mark into it." So I saw your bombing. And I tell you what, General, you're a very accurate bomber. And so my time was up to retire. I got my retirement orders, and And we drove back to the East Coast, to our house that we owned there, and turned on my phone. I got a call from a friend. He said, hey, you know that new rank they're going to have in the Marine Corps, Chief Warrant Officer 5? I said, yeah. He said, you've been selected to the first one. You're number 1 on the list for that new rank. He said, well, you got to call Wing right now and tell them you'll take it, because tomorrow is too late. It was the end of my career. So I called him up, and they sent a message to Headquarters Marine Corps, said I accept it. He said, well, you got to stay in for 2 more years. And I said, that's great. No problem. So I had 2 more years in the Marine Corps, and you know, the fun thing was they were shutting down the squadron. We just started doing fun flights. We would load up with rockets and machine gun bullets and just fly up to the ranges and just spend all afternoon shooting stuff and shooting machine guns and shooting rockets off the OV-10s. It was a blast, you know. And I'd get to shoot some from the back seat there, you know, and didn't have a trigger in the back seat, but I'd tell the pilot, I'm flying a plane. I'd say, all right, fire. You know, and I use the old, what we call in the OV-10 community, the TLAR bomb sight. Put a little grease point on your window, and that looks about right, the TLAR, and pull the trigger and shoot the rocket. We just had a blast doing that for the last few months, just having the times of our lives, and of course taking cross countries everywhere you can think about. Just flying and flying. It was fun. But I was in charge of decommissioning the squadron, so I had to do that, which was a shame. And then I went back out, flew out to California and witnessed their decommissioning. And then I helped to fly the planes to the boneyard in Tucson, and it was a sad call when you call tower and say, we're turning base and 3 down and locked, full stop, last stop. So I left that, and then we went, like I said, I was already back at the East Coast there, and retired from the Marine Corps and started doing nothing. My wife says, all you're going to do is nothing? I said, I'm not done yet. So finally she came out of the house one day and she said, look, is this what you're going to do the rest of your life? And I said, I don't know. And she said, here. She had me an application. And my degree was in mathematics. And she said, they're looking for math teachers out at the community college. And so I went out there, and to show you how serious it was, I wore those cargo shorts and flip-flops to the interview. And I walked in there because I didn't care, you know. I walked in there and I talked for about 5 minutes and said, you're hired. I said, holy cow. So I taught math out there for about 6 or 7 years, and I just finally got tired of it, you know, and it was no fun at all. You know, it just wasn't fun. Look, I have a student come in one day, and he would say, am I passing, Mr. Hunter? And I'd say, all right, how many tests have we had? He said, 5. I said, how many of you failed? He said, 3. And I said, what do you think? And but back to the what General Horner said, and the General Peterson, was it? Yes, about air power. And I got to tell you all, since you guys are the driving force for air power, the Air Force, of course, Air Force, and to be on the receiving end of that is demoralizing. You know, with all the bombing. And I think that's what destroyed those people. It just demoralized them and won us that war. And I got to tell you, I hope whatever we do, we never lose sight of the fact that it's not just air superiority we want air supremacy. Because once you got that, you've got the war won. And you guys are going to be doing that. You know, it's not really the Marine Corps, you know. We're committed to like frontline stuff and drinking beer at the club. And you guys are committed to bombing and blowing the hell out of people. And so that works out just right from my viewpoint. I gave a couple of talks up there once or twice at the Memorial Day services, and I just want to bring up another factor. And I mentioned this, the people, I think, who suffer the most is not the POWs during these episodes. It's their family waiting back home because they have no idea what's going on. And one of the things that worried me the most was they were going to kill us over there, and they would never know what happened to me. And my wife, Mary, would go the rest of her life just worrying and wondering. So, and that tells you something there. And so I know that just it just terrifies them at heart. And I could tell that too, because when the first night we were back in the States, and went to get undressed to take my shower, and go to bed, and she took a look and saw all those sores and bruise marks all over me. She just burst into tears. But it's a harrowing experience for the families, and I think more so than us who were captured and shot down over there. So that's one of the bad things. But that's when you there's an old saying, when you take the king's shilling, you do the king's bidding. We signed up for this. I have no regrets about any of it. I've told Mary and lots of folks ever since, I really enjoyed being in the Marine Corps. I enjoyed being a Marine. I enjoyed doing this and going to Vietnam, which, by the way, that was my war, Vietnam. I was over there so much. But I enjoyed doing it all. If I had my druthers, I'd do it all again, every bit of it. I don't know if we got time for questions, or is there?
We have time for one question.
Really? That's all?
Yes, sir.
Well, they always say I like to hear my voice run. Any questions at all, folks? I'll tell you what I can.
Sir, I'll ask one. Do you keep in touch with former POWs that you've been held captive with?
Yeah, we email back and forth quite a bit. I even talk to them occasionally. The last big gathering we had was in London, and I couldn't make that because, unfortunately, my cancer was back, so I was grounded, sort of. Couldn't get it over. Can't walk very far anymore. And so I just had to miss it. But I still email them back and forth, send them all kinds of great jokes, That's what the internet was invented for, to share jokes. So it was a fun experience, but those guys were great. Jeff Tice, one of the best guys I ever knew, he was swarthy complexion, And the Iraqis thought he was Arabic sometimes, and they'd walk up in front of him and just start speaking Arabic to him, trying to get him to speak some Arab back at him, and they were going to nail him if he did. And the other thing they were doing, they were wondering who amongst us, if there was a Jews amongst us. They made everybody drop trowels and check for circumcisions. Thought I was back in the flight surgeon's office again. But that went by, and there's a couple of them died since we all got back. It's a shame. One guy's wife left him. I guess she couldn't stand the strain or something. But a couple of them were dead, and young guys, Sly Fox, dementia, I guess is what I heard from the folks down at Pensacola. It's a shame. They beat us so bad on the heads that I guess it affected him too much. People ask me once or twice about leadership, and I've told them, and he's got in that little book about my section there, and I'm glad I was thinking along those lines at least with General Horner, because be consistent, Like he said, if you're going to be an animal, but be consistent and be fair. And that's what I learned from Vietnam. And like General Peterson said about your NCOs, they can do lots more than you think they can. I was harking back to Vietnam in 1966. I got off the ship in Da Nang, and I was a corporal when I got off the ship. And I immediately got promoted to sergeant because I was due for it. And the next day, they sent me to Saigon, where I joined a unit called Anglico. I don't know if most of you don't know about it, but I went down to Anglico and had a lieutenant colonel there, an aviator, by the way, the CO of Anglico. And he says, we got several teams open, but what do you want to do? And I said, I'd like to be a team chief. So he says, all right, you're a sergeant, you got it. And I was a sergeant for one day, and I was a team chief up there in the Nha Trang area in Southern 2 Corps. For a long time, I was a sergeant, and I was a senior Marine within 200 miles of that place, 200 miles of coastline. And I got to run my Naval Gunfire Spot team the way I saw it. And you know what? There was no adult supervision from the Marine Corps on me. So we had a blast up there. We were just shooting naval gunfire left and right all the time up there. Anything we get our hands on. Later on, they sent us a Navy lieutenant from the Intrepid carrier. And he was a good guy. We did the same thing. And, years later, when he was dying of cancer, he called me up and we just chit-chatted for a few minutes, and he says, I cannot believe they let you and me roam around that country shooting whatever the hell we felt like shooting at for that entire year over there. And I said, yeah, it was glorious, wasn't it? Anyway, that's just another thing. And I was a sergeant doing what was supposed to be a Marine officer's job. And we had several other sergeants doing that up and down the coast in backseat of 01 Bird Dogs, which was a great plane in my estimation. It was fun to fly in that thing. Anyway, enough about leadership for the NCOs. Like he said, give them a chance, they'll do wonders for you. That's my experience on my end. Anything, folks?
Well, Chief Warrant Officer Hunter, I just want to say thank you so much for coming out here today and sharing your incredible experience with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So that will conclude our presentations for today. On behalf of the Air Command and Staff College, we want to give a sincere thanks to General Horner. Thank you, sir. General Feast. Thank you, General Johnson. Thank you, sir. And of course, Chief Warrant Officer Hunter. At this time, I'm going to ask you guys to stand by, and we will escort our Eagles and their distinguished and their guests out. Thank you.